My name is Suzanne Chandler. I'm 34 years old, and for 9 years I paid my parents' rent to sleep in my childhood bedroom. Last March, my mom slid a note under my door raising that rent again because my brother's business needed what she called family support. I read it twice. Then I did what I do for a living. I ran the numbers. The rent was never the real bill. 6 weeks later, buried in my credit report, I found my own name written in someone else's handwriting, attached to $38,000 I never borrowed. What I did about it is the reason my family is still blowing up my phone and why my mother tells people I destroyed this family. Stay with me, because the part where they start panicking is not the part you're expecting. Welcome back to Last Laugh Stories, where quiet people finally stop paying for everyone else's peace. Grab your coffee and settle in. If you have ever been the reliable one in your family, the one who remembers the bills and gets remembered last, this story is for you. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe. To picture my family, picture a kitchen in Dayton, Ohio, with a spiral notebook on the counter. The notebook was my mother's blue cover, grease stain, columns ruled by hand. Every dollar that moved through our house got a line in that notebook. Groceries, gas, the church envelope, my rent. Mom had run the books for my grandfather's laundromat for 30 years. Then the treasury for her church, and she kept our family the same way, like a small business with one shareholder. I moved back home when I was 25. I'd been in Chicago 3 years, building a decent life as a data analyst, when my dad had his heart attack. Mom called me from the hospital hallway and said one sentence that reorganized my whole life. "We need you home, Suzanne." So I came home. It made sense. Then Dad was 57, wired to machines, and somebody had to keep the household standing while Mom sat with him. When he stabilized, Mom suggested I stay a while and pay $600 a month for my old room. Bored, she called it. Cheaper than any apartment in town, and the money stayed in the family. I'm a numbers person. $600 was fair, so I paid it. First of every month, cash in an envelope next to the sugar jar. She logged it in the notebook with a little check mark, like a payment received on an account I didn't know I had. For a long time, I found that notebook comforting. Everything visible. Everything counted, everything fair. It took me 9 years to notice the flaw in the ledger, and it wasn't in the math. There was only one name in that family the notebook never tracked. My brother Brandon is 37, 3 years older than me, and he has never once been handed a bill at my parents' table. He runs a marketing agency called BC Peak Marketing, which is a big name for one man, a laptop, and a logo that has changed twice. When Brandon bought his townhouse across town, my parents covered the down payment. Nobody discussed it at dinner. I learned it from an aunt. When his first agency folded, they absorbed that too. Sunday dinners at our house had a choreography. You could set a clock by. Brandon got served first. Brandon got asked how business was going, and his answers were weather reports. Always sunny, always about to break big. I got asked whether I'd paid the electric because somewhere along the line, the electric had migrated onto my plate along with the internet and half the groceries. I noticed the pattern. Believe me, I noticed. I once pointed out mildly that I seemed to be the only person at the table with a balanced due. My mother didn't argue. She smiled, reached over, patted my hand, and said it the way other mothers say grace. Everything in this family is everyone's. She meant it as comfort. She meant it as a creed. And I'll admit the sentence sounds beautiful, until you sit down like I eventually did and chart 9 years of it. My rent had gone up twice before that note under the door. Once when I was 28, once when I was 31. I checked the dates later against Brandon's business filings, because that is the kind of thing I do. Both raises landed within weeks of one of his ventures quietly dying. Everything in this family was everyone's. Some of us were just more everyone than others. I want to be clear about something, because I know how this sounds. I was not a doormat with a checkbook. I saw the current I was standing in, and twice I tried to walk out of it. At 28, I had a deposit ready on a one-bedroom near my office. The week I was going to sign, Dad's cardiologist found something on a stress test, and Mom fell apart at the kitchen table, and the family needed me. My paycheck, my steadiness, my ride to appointments. The apartment went to someone else. The stress test in the end came back fine. At 31, I tried again. That time it was Mom's gallbladder surgery, which was real, and her recovery, which somehow required my presence for 8 months. I don't do feelings without a spreadsheet, so I will tell you exactly what I did instead of leaving. I built one. Every payment, every covered bill, every emergency loan to Brandon that was never called a loan. I tracked it the way I track freight costs for the logistics company that pays me. Quietly, precisely, in a file my family never saw. And I set myself a target in writing like any serious project. A condo of my own before my 35th birthday. Small, sunny, one balcony big enough for a pot of basil. I had the down payment saved by 33. I had the credit score. I had a date circled. That's the part that still gets me. Honestly, I wasn't drifting. I was executing a plan on schedule, while paying my family for the privilege of waiting. I thought I was buying time. It took one note under my door and one loan application to teach me what I was actually buying. The note came on a Tuesday in March. Mom didn't knock. She slid it under my door sometime before 6 because she knew I left for work at 7, and a note can't be argued with over breakfast. Her handwriting neat as a hymnal. Starting the 1st, rent will bun 900. Utilities and groceries have gone up, sweetheart. Love mun 900. I sat on the edge of my childhood bed, under the water stains shaped like Ohio, that I'd been looking at since 4th grade. And I did what I always do with a suspicious number. I benchmarked it. A room in a shared house in Dayton ran maybe 700. A one-bedroom apartment, 1,000 and change. For 900 a month. I could rent an entire house with a yard, or carry the mortgage on the condo I'd been, saving toward with money left over for the basil. My parents were charging me above market rate to sleep 10th off from where my baby teeth came out. And utilities hadn't gone up, by the way. I pay them. I have the statements. Groceries were up maybe 3%, not 35. Numbers don't lie, but they do point. And these all pointed at the same question. Where was the extra 500 a month actually going? I got my answer that Friday without asking. Brandon posted a photo online, arms crossed in front of an empty storefront on Wayne Avenue, caption full of rockets and fire. Big news. BC Peak Marketing is new, expanding. New office, new chapter. Blessed and grateful, grateful. I remember saying the word out loud alone, in my car in the tone you'd use for a swear. He should have been. Gratitude was cheap for him. I was the one getting billed for it. I waited until Sunday after the dishes when the kitchen was just the 3 of us. I put the note on the counter next to the notebook, and I asked my mother calmly if the extra 500 was going to Brandon's new office. I'll give my mom this. She has never insulted me by lying about the small things. She dried her hands on the towel, folded it in thirds the way she has folded it my whole life and said, yes. Part of it was helping my brother through a tight season, and that this was what families did. Her voice had that warm, settled certainty, like she was explaining tides to a child. Your brother is building something, Suzanne. You have a good job. It evens out. I looked at my father. Dad was at the sink washing a mug that was already clean and he kept washing it. He's a retired machinist. He can hold a tolerance of 1,000th of an inch, and he could not hold eye contact with me in his own kitchen. All he said was, "Don't make it a thing, Susie. Don't make it a thing." That was the house motto. The grease that kept the machine quiet. I stood there doing math I hated. 900 a month was 22,800 a year paid to people who thought fairness was a mood I got into. And then I surprised them. I said, fine, I'd pay the new rate starting the 1st on one condition. My mother was already smiling when the condition landed and I watched the smile stall. From now on, I said, nothing moves in cash. Every dollar I hand this family goes through the bank in writing where I can see it. You'd have thought I asked her to notarize a hug. My mother actually laughed one short note and said, don't do invoices in a family, Suzanne. But I held it politely the way you hold a line item in an audit. No drama, no raised voice, just no more envelopes by the sugar jar. Starting April, my rent went by bank transfer with a memo line that said rent, and the electric went with a memo that said electric. And when Mom asked me to cover Brandon's car insurance for 1 month, just 1 month, that transfer said Brandon Insurance, and I watched her face when she read it. For the first time in 9 years, the family money had a paper trail with my name spelled out on my side of it, and something about that bothered her far more than the amounts. She started taking the notebook off the counter when I came into the kitchen. Fine paper is my language. I balance 11 million freight budgets for a living. I can document a household in my sleep, and I had my own project that spring. My down payment was sitting in savings like a dog by the door. My credit score, the last time I'd glanced at the app, was a 780. I gathered my pay-ubs, my tax returns, 2 years of bank statements, and made an appointment at Cornerstone Home, lending for a mortgage pre-approval, because the plan said condo by 35, and the plan was all I had that felt like mine. I remember thinking, driving to work, that paper never betrayed anybody. It took 2 more weeks for me to learn that somebody had been speaking my language for 2 years fluently in my name, and I hadn't heard a word of it. The Sunday before my lending appointment, dinner came with a presentation. Brandon showed up with a folder, an actual folder, glossy, with the BC Peak logo, and while Mom served the roast, he pitched us his expansion like we were a bank. Foot traffic on Wayne Avenue, brand visibility. He needed, he said, 1 more round of family investment to get across the finish line. And he looked at me on the word family, not at Dad, at me. And my mother looked at me too, hands folded, glowing like it was a recital. That was the moment the last piece of fog burned off. The rent raise wasn't the plan. The rent raise was the down payment on the plan, a test to see how much more I'd carry without breaking formation. I set down my fork and said, "No, just that at first," and the room went so still I could hear the clock above the stove. Then I said I was already contributing $500 a month to BC Peak, whether I chose to or not, and that I would not be investing further because I was buying a home this year. Brandon's jaw did something complicated. Dad studied his plate like it had instructions on it. And my mother said quietly with more disappointment than anger, after his snorts, "Everything this family has done for you. I want you to sit with that," sentenced the way I had to. I had paid them rent for 108 months. After everything this family had done for me, I didn't fight. I cleared my plate, went upstairs to my room, and submitted my mortgage documents that night. That application saved my life. It also lit the fuse that blew my family apart. The loan officer at Cornerstone was a cheerful woman with reading glasses on a chain, and for 40 minutes sitting across from her, I got to be a version of myself my family had never met. Strong income, N years of perfect payment, history on every account I opened. A down payment that made her eyebrows go up in a pleasant way. She asked what I was looking for, and I heard myself describe it like I was describing a person. Has Snort's 2 bedrooms so my grandmother could stay over. East-facing balcony because Basil wants morning sun. A door. I almost said that locks from my side with a key nobody else has a copy of. I didn't say the last part. She said, "Honestly, this looks clean. I expect this to for 10 days. I let myself live in that sentence. I looked at listings on my lunch break. I found a unit by the river with an east balcony and saved the photos to a folder on my phone labeled 35 because it was March and my 35th birthday was 11 months out, and the plan for once for the first time since Chicago was ahead of schedule. I even started sleeping better, which tells you how little I saw coming. On a Thursday at 2:00 in the afternoon, my phone rang at my desk, Cornerstone's number. I picked up smiling, ready to schedule a walkthrough. The loan officer wasn't smiling. I could hear it. She said there had been a complication with my file, and she needed to ask me about a debt I hadn't disclosed. I said that wasn't possible. I disclose everything. Disclosure is practically my personality. She said, "Mom, can you tell me about the obligation you signed at Miami Valley Community Credit Union?" I said out loud at my desk in an office full of people. I have never signed anything in my life. Even as I said it, I was pulling up my banking app with the other hand because I trust verification more than I trust my own pulse. The loan officer read me the details in the flat voice people use when the news is doing the yelling for them. A personal loan originated 2 years ago at Miami Valley Community Credit Union. Original amount $38,000. Primary borrower Brandon R. Chandler. Co-signer Suzanne M. Chandler. Payment history on time for 20 months. Then 4 missed payments in a row. The most recent 30 days ago. Each one filed against my credit like a stone through a window. My debt-to-income ratio was wrecked. My score had dropped 90 points in 4 months. My pre-approval was denied. She was kind about it. She said, if the account was unfamiliar, I should pull my full reports immediately. And she said the word fraud in the careful way banks say it, holding it with tongs. I thanked her. I hung up. I sat in my ergonomic chair in my open plan office and stared at my monitor where a freight dashboard was cheerfully refreshing itself. And the only thought I could complete was 20 months. Whoever did this made the payments for 20 months quietly, reliably, right up until Brandon's money got tight, which I could date to the week, because that was when my rent went up, my condo was gone, my score was gone, and somewhere in a credit union, file drawer across town, there was a signature, 2 years old, pretending to be mine. Brandon borrowed the money, but Brandon has never made a payment reliably in his life. Somebody else ran that loan. That night, I did what I do best, which is also the only thing that keeps me calm. I audited. I pulled full reports from all 3 bureaus. The real reports a page by page, not the app score with the smiling green dial, and there it was on everyone. The loan, the hard inquiry that opened it, dated almost exactly 2 years back. I checked that date against my own calendar, because I keep my everything, and my stomach dropped through the floor of the house. I was paying $4,900 to sleep in. The inquiry date was the day the whole family went to Miami Valley together to set up Dad's retirement disbursements. I'd driven them there myself. I'd sat in the waiting area answering work emails, while Mom shuttled papers between the desk and the little glass office, because Mom handles the paperwork. Mom has always handled the paperwork. Mom keeps every birth certificate and Social Security card in this family in a fireproof box in her closet and considers that normal mothering. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I moved fast and quiet. The way you move when you smell smoke, but haven't found the fire. By midnight, I had frozen my credit at all 3 bureaus, changed every password I owned, ordered the full loan file from the credit union, which I was entitled to as the named code signer, and booked their next available fraud appointment. At 100 in the morning. I came downstairs for water and found Dad at the kitchen table with a crossword he wasn't doing. I asked him one question, quiet and plain. Did he know anything about a loan with my name on it? He looked at the puzzle and said, "Don't make it a thing, Susie." That was the moment I stopped having 2 parents. The fraud specialist at Miami Valley was a woman named Dana Whitfield. 50s. Gray streak, the unhurried manner of someone who has seen every kind of Tuesday. She laid the loan file between us and walked me through my options like a surgeon explaining an operation. If the signature wasn't mine, I could file a fraud claim. The credit union would investigate, and if it substantiated, my name would come off the loan and the late payments would be scrubbed from my reports. But a claim required 3 things: a sworn affidavit, notarized, a police report, and a name. She looked at me steadily on that last one. The affidavit identifies a person, Miss Chandler. Before you sign it, be sure you're prepared for who that might be. Then she turned the file around and showed me the signature page, and the room got very quiet. Or I did. There was my name, Suzanne M. Chandler in blue ink, right where a co-signer signs, and it was wrong. Not clumsily wrong, lovingly wrong, if that makes sense. Written by a hand that had signed my permission slips and my report cards and my summer camp forms. The S didn't hook the way I hook it. The whole name leaned the way a different generation leans. I have watched that handwriting total grocery columns my entire life. It was not my brother's writing. I'm going to pause here, because I can feel some of you shaking your heads. If you're listening to this thinking my family would never, I ran risk models for a living and I thought the same thing. Pull your credit report this week. All 3 bureaus. The full report. Not the app score. It's free. It takes 20 minutes and it is the cheapest peace of mind in America. If this story is your sign to finally do it, tell me in the comments and subscribe. Because what my mother said, when I finally put that signature in front of her, explains everything about how families like mine work. Here is why I didn't drive straight home and put the file on the kitchen counter. Because I only had one shot at doing this right, and accusing the wrong person would torch it. The affidavit named a name under oath. If I wrote the wrong one, if I assumed Brandon because the money went to Brandon, the claim could fall apart and take my credibility with it. And in a fraud case, the co-signer's credibility is the whole case. I needed to be sure, not almost sure. So, I did the unglamorous thing. I booked a consultation with a consumer attorney. 30 minutes for $150. Best money I ever spent. She confirmed what Dana had implied. Forgery is a crime in Ohio. Once I filed a police report naming a family member, there was no dial on it. No taking it back, no keeping it in the family. She also told me gently that most people in my chair never file at all. They eat the debt to keep the peace. The banks even have a nickname for it, friendly fraud, which is the ugliest pair of words I know. Then she gave me a checklist, and checklists are my love language. Open new accounts at a different bank entirely. Route my direct deposit. Copy every document out of that house. Keep my routine boring and my face normal. I gave myself 10 days. 10 days of eating my mother's pot roast and saying good night up the stairs with a fraud file in my work bag and a freeze on everything I owned. People think the hardest part of leaving is the door. It isn't. It's the acting. And before I could afford to stop acting, I needed one thing. Money actually could buy somewhere to land. The apartment was a studio on the east side of Dayton, second floor of a brick fourplex unit 2B. The landlord, Mr. Hale, was a retired postal worker who asked exactly 3 questions, verified my income, and did not care about my family's opinion of me, which made him my favorite person in Ohio. It was 1 room and a strip of kitchen. The refrigerator hummed in flat. The window faced east. I signed the lease on my lunch break on a Wednesday, using the new bank account my family didn't know existed. And Mr. Hale put the key in my palm like it was nothing. Like he did it every day, which he did. A brass key, cheap, freshly cut, edges still sharp. I stood in the middle of that empty apartment on my lunch hour, in my work blazer holding it. 34 years old. It was the first key of my life that no one else had a copy of, not a spare in my mother's junk drawer, not a copy labeled in her handwriting in the fireproof box. Mine singular, unduplicated, and the fact that I could count on one hand the things I owned outright at my age, a car, a laptop, and now a key, told me everything about the account my family had been running in my name since I was 25. I didn't move a single box that day. It wasn't time. I drove back to the office, dropped the key into the inside pocket of my coat, and zipped it. For the next 3 weeks, through everything that came, I carried it there. I'd find my thumb pressed against it in elevators, in meetings in my parents' kitchen. Now I had a door. What I needed next was the truth out loud in my mother's own voice. I ran my last test at Sunday dinner, and I ran it soft. Over the roast casually, I mentioned that work was making me update my emergency documents. And did Mom still have my birth certificate and social security card in the box in her closet? She didn't even look up from her plate. Of course she did, honey. Where else would they be? I said, easy as anything that maybe I should keep my own now that I was in my 30s. And my mother laughed, the warm laugh, the one that files you under adorable, and said, end this house. Everything in this family is everyone's. I heard the sentence I'd been hearing my whole life. I also heard it the new way. The way you hear a song differently once someone tells you what it's actually about. Across the table, Brandon was in a mood to perform because the office build-out was behind and money was visibly tight, and he started reminiscing about how smooth the loan process had been 2 years ago. Best rate in town, no hassle. Then he said, grinning at Mom, raising his water glass like a toast. Mom handled the paperwork. She should have been a banker. My mother smiled into her plate. A small smile, a treasurer's smile. My thumb found the brass key through the lining of my coat, on the chair beside me, and I made myself eat 3 more bites, complimented the carrots, and started clearing dishes because the acting wasn't done. But walking to the sink, I finally admitted the thing my spreadsheet brain had been refusing to round up. He didn't know how his own loan got signed. She should have been a banker. She had been mine. Monday after work, I sat in my car in the company parking lot with 2 documents on my lap. The photocopied signature page from the loan file, and a birthday card kept for sentimental reasons that were now forensic ones. To our dependable girl, love always. Mom. Written in her hand 2 years ago, the same season the loan was signed. I'm an analyst. Pattern matching is the job. I laid the card against the photocopy in the gray light and compared them stroke by stroke, and there was no version of squinting that made them strangers. The same left lean, the same impatient little finishing flick where a word ends, and the S in Suzanne. My mother makes an S like a treble cleft. Always has. It's on every gift tag and every Christmas photo album we own. The S on the loan was a treble cleft. My own S looks nothing like that, which any handwriting examiner would establish in about a minute, and which my mother, who has received 100 notes and checks and cards from me, either never noticed or never worried about. That last part is the one that sat in my chest like a stone. She wasn't careful because she wasn't afraid. It had never occurred to her that I was a person who might check. I sat in that parking lot for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and did the only thing that has ever kept me from coming apart. I wrote it up. A timeline dated and sourced the way I'd document a freight discrepancy for my director. Facts in rows, feelings nowhere. When it was done, I read it once, closed the laptop, and decided my mother would get the one thing this family never gave me, a chance to tell the truth. I picked a Thursday afternoon when Dad was out at his weekly card game, and the house was just us. My mother was at the kitchen table with coupons. I put the photocopy down on top of them, signature up, and I asked her in the flattest of voice I own to tell me about it. And here is the thing I genuinely did not see coming. She didn't flinch. She picked it up, read it like a receipt, set it down, and smoothed it flat with her palm twice, the way she smooths everything, and said, "Your brother needed a co-signer with good credit. You have good credit because we raised you right." I waited for more. There was more, but not the kind I was waiting for. "You were never going to miss it." She said the payments were being made. "It's the same pot, Suzanne. A little from your side, a little to his side. That's all a family is." She was patient with me. That's what turns my stomach in the retelling. She explained my own robbery to me in the voice you'd use for a child who doesn't want to share. And then, seeing my face, her voice cooled Finton breeds, and she said the part she'd clearly rehearsed. "If you go making this a police matter, the borrower on that loan is your brother. He's the one they'll come after first. Is that what you want on your conscience?" I stood in my childhood kitchen, thumb pressed so hard against the key in my coat pocket. I could feel the teeth of it. And I understood that she had known this day might come, and had already decided how to spend my brother if it did. I said, "Thank you for being honest." I meant it, and I went upstairs and started very quietly wrapping glasses in newspaper. It took less than 2 days for the family to switch on the machine. I assume Mom briefed them the same night, because by Saturday morning the coordinated concern was rolling in on schedule like sprinklers. Dad caught me by the garage looking older than I'd ever let myself notice, and said my mother had been up all night crying twice, and couldn't I see what this was doing to her. Brandon texted a paragraph with no punctuation. Snorts. He swore he'd had no idea how the cosign happened. He'd assumed I agreed to it, because that's what Mom told him. And then one text later, the mask slipped sideways. "But if you report this, you're not hurting her. You're killing this family over money. You literally were not even using money. I was not even using my credit. The mathematics of the same pot arriving by text. Then Aunt Renee called Mom's cousin the family switchboard to remind me what a blessing it was to have parents at all. Hers being gone, and to mention that her neighbor's daughter pressed charges against a relative once and now eats Thanksgiving at a gas station probably. Not one of them. Not one asked me a single question about what had been taken from me. The word forgery never crossed the family's lips. It had already been renamed the misunderstanding. The way our family renames anything it plans to bury. I didn't argue with any of them. Arguing was fuel, and I was done providing fuel. I said I heard them. Then I went to my room, closed the door, and completed my federal identity theft report at the government website. Attachment by attachment in the tidy silence, they had all mistaken for surrender. It wasn't surrender. It was me packing. I planned my exit like a freight run because that's what it was. Cargo route the window. I booked a rental van for a Friday and took the day off work. Beth was my ground crew. Beth Okafor, my roommate from college, an ICU nurse with 4 arms like a dock worker and zero sentimentality about my family. Tore her snorts tore. When I told her everything over her kitchen counter, she was quiet for 1 second and then said, "Suz, if a stranger did this, you'd have called the police from the bank lobby." Which is the sentence I'd been walking around not saying to myself for 3 weeks. The packing itself was the education. 9 years in that house, and my whole life fit in a levanting I'd bought myself, a shoebox of cards and photos. The furniture was theirs. The dishes were theirs. Even the lamp by my bed had been built to me once on the notebook page. I'd seen the line lamp for S' room, and yet somehow it wasn't mine either. My spreadsheet says I put well over $120,000 into that household across 9 years, rent and bills and rescues combined. 11 boxes is what came out. I'm not telling you that to make you sad. I'm telling you because I stood in that room doing the arithmetic, and the arithmetic is what made me strong enough for what came next. The only question left was timing, and my brother, bless him, had already put the perfect night on the calendar. Brandon's grand opening was a Friday evening in May, string lights in the storefront window, a folding table of sparkling cider. The whole family summoned to admire the sign. My parents left the house at 6, dressed for church. I'd told Mom that morning I might be late to the party work thing, and watched the lie land without a ripple, and understood I had learned fluent acting. In her kitchen, after all. The van was loaded by 80-40-11 boxes don't take long. Then I walked back into that, and kitchen one last time, and set out 3 things on the counter next to the sugar jar where the envelopes used to go. My house key, a single printed page. 9 years of rent and bills, dated, totaled the bottom, no commentary because the numbers had never once needed my help, and a short letter that took me longer to write than this whole story is taking to tell. It said I knew about the signature. It said my credit was frozen, the auto-pays were canceled, and the utilities were coming out of my name at the end of the billing cycle. It said I was safe and gone, and that I would not be at Sunday dinner. I signed it the way I sign everything. My real S, the one that doesn't loop like a treble cleft, and for the first time in my life, my own signature felt like armor. Then I drove east across town to a brick 4-plex, carried 11 boxes up one flight, and turned the deadbolt on 2B from the inside. The bolt made a sound like a struck bell. If you've ever ended a life in one evening, you know that sound. At 3 minutes 11, my phone lit up with my mother's name. It did not stop lighting up for 3 days. Here's what nobody tells you about being the family utility. They don't notice you're a person until you have an outage. By Saturday noon, I had a call log that looked like a denial of service for attack. Dozens from Mom, a handful from Dad, Brandon in bursts of 3. The voicemails told the whole story in order, like core samples. The early ones were syrup. "Sweetheart, this is silly. Come home, we'll talk. I made too much of food." The middle ones were the rasp under the syrup. "You're punishing your whole family to make a point, Suzanne. This childishness is beneath you." And then Mondays. After the first of the month arrived and the transfers didn't, After the electric bill surfaced in a name that was no longer mine. After the internet went to past due. After the credit union, following up on my claim, called the primary borrower directly at his brand new office. Monday's voicemail was neither syrup nor rasp. It was cold and quiet, and it said, "Come home and we will forget this childishness ever happened." Forget. Even then, the family currency was forgetting, and she was still trying to pay me in it. I want to be honest with you about what those 3 days felt like, because it wasn't triumph. They weren't panicking because they missed me. Every single crisis in that phone was the sound of a bill arriving at its rightful address for the first time in 9 years. I listened to the voicemails once each, took notes like the analyst I am, and did not call back. Then I drove to the hardware store and bought a terracotta pot and a basil seedling and set it on the east window sill of 2B 6 blocks and One Universe from Wayne Avenue. Quick pause, friend. If you have ever been the family ATM, the reliable one, the one whose crisis line was always open and whose own line rang out, type the word ledger in the comments. I read every single one. And subscribe because the next part is where my 85-year-old grandmother opens a photo box, and it's the part of this story I still cannot tell without stopping once. Week 2. The extended family deployed. That's the phase nobody warns you about. The flying monkeys, Beth calls them, though ours arrived by phone and casserole. Aunt Renee again, gentler this time. Then sharper. A cousin I hadn't heard from in 4 years opened, with "Hey stranger," and got to your poor mother in under a minute. 2 ladies from Mom's church left messages about forgiveness. The word police in their mouths like a live coal, and the sentence underneath every call, the actual message was the same. Family doesn't call the police on family. Notice what the sentence isn't. It isn't family doesn't forge family's name. Nobody in 2 weeks said that sentence to me even once. I finally understood that the tribunal I was standing in front of had no column for true or false, only for inside and outside, and I had done the one unforgivable thing. I had carried an inside thing outside to people with badges and file numbers, where the family's math could be checked by strangers. One cousin compared me to someone we don't talk about anymore, a great uncle nobody would explain. And honestly, I heard that as a promotion. But there was one message in the pile that didn't match the queer, and I have read it 500 times since. It was from my grandmother, Margaret, my mother's mother, 85 years old, sent at 6000 in the morning from the senior community on Far Hills. It said, "Come Sunday, bring the papers." Before Sunday there was Thursday, and Thursday belonged to Dana Whitfield. I took a late lunch and sat in her little office while she confirmed in her unhurried way that the machinery was turning. My federal identity theft report was in the file. The credit union's own document review had flagged the co-signature as inconsistent with every true signature of mine they had on record. My checking account card from age 19, my direct deposit forms, and consistent with what she called with bank-grade delicacy, a third party's hand, meaning not mine and not the primary borrower's either. Nobody at that credit union wanted a lawsuit about a forged instrument witnessed at their own desk. So, for once in this story, an institution was motivated to move fast on my behalf. Trossa Hayes snorts a tort 2 items remained before my name came off that loan and the late payments came off my reports. A police report and the notarized affidavit. Dana slid the affidavit across the desk so I could see the empty lines. Date of discovery, description of the fraudulent instrument. And then the line that had been waiting for me since March, short and wide and blank, identity of the person believed responsible. She told me to take it home. She told me not to sign it until I was certain, because certain is a place you can't come back from. I put it in my work bag between my laptop and my lunch where it sat for 3 days humming like a wire. My grandmother's apartment at the senior community smells like lavender in 1974. She had coffee ready in a shoe box on the table with a rubber band around it. And she is not a woman you rush. She looked at my papers first. Really looked at glasses on, reading the affidavit line by line like a contract. Then she took the rubber band off the box. The photograph she handed me was black and white, scalloped edges. A girl 19, maybe standing in front of my grandfather's laundromat with a boy a few years younger. The girl was my mother. Same chin, same steady eyes. "Patricia," my grandmother said, "hand your Uncle Teddy her pay envelope every single month for 6 years." I knew my great-uncle Teddy only as a name we didn't finish sentences about. Margaret finished them. Teddy was the investment. She told me, the son. Patricia worked the counter and the books from 16 on, and her wages went into the family fund. And the family fund went to Teddy's schooling, which he quit, and Teddy's shop, which failed. And no one ever paid your mother back one. And she said this part slowly, like paying out rope. Nobody ever called it stealing. It was just what daughters were for. Then my 5-year-old grandmother put her cup down and said the thing I moved into 2B to be able to hear. "I taught your mother that love is a bill. I was wrong. Don't you dare pay it." I sat in the lavender quiet, holding a photo of my mother back when she was me. It did not make the signature hurt less. It made it hurt correctly, 3 generations deep. In the car afterward, my phone buzzed. My father, a man who texts like telegrams cost money. Family meeting, Sunday dinner. "Please, Roy." Beth said, "Don't go." She said it over pad thai at her place, jabbing chopsticks at me for emphasis. You don't owe them a meeting. You don't owe them a hearing. You are the victim, Suz. Not the appeals court. Every word was true, and I went anyway. And I want to be honest with you about why. Because this is the part of the story where I stopped being a spreadsheet. Part of me went because you finish things in person. That's the professional answer. But the realer answer is that 34 years of being somebody's daughter doesn't cancel like an ought to pay. Some cell in me was still waiting for the version of that dinner where my mother looks at me and says the word sorry with nothing attached to it. No because, no but, no invoice. I knew the odds. I'd modeled them. I went anyway because I needed to watch the odds play out with my own eyes, or I'd spend the rest of my life wondering. I prepared the only way I know how. Into one folder went the letter their position required, the one Dad had already floated on the phone, drafted by some helpful notion of Mom's, stating that I had verbally authorized the loan, and it had all been a family misunderstanding, unsigned. Into the other folder went Dana's affidavit, also unsigned. 2 futures, 1 work bag, 15 minutes across town to my parents' house. I'm not going to pretend I knew which folder was coming back out. My mother cooked my 12-year-old self's favorite meal. Pot roast with the brown sugar carrots, rolls from scratch, and the lemon cake she makes for birthdays. And if you think that was a coincidence, you have never met a treasurer. The table was set with the good plates. 5 chairs, Dad at the head, Gray and rehearsed. Brandon across from me with the smile he uses on clients, minus the confidence. Mom at her post by the stove, apron on, warmth turned to broil, and 1 chair empty. I asked after Grandma, mostly to hear what they'd say, and Mom said lightly that she wasn't feeling up to it. That was one more small lie for the ledger. I happened to know exactly how up to it Margaret was, because when I'd asked her that morning if she wanted to come, she'd said, "I've sat at that table long enough, child. Go end it." Dinner started with weather and rolls. Nobody mentioned that I'd moved out of this house like a fugitive 3 weeks ago. The family specialty has always been catering around a corpse. Then when the plates were cleared, and the lemon cake landed in front of me, my slice cut first, the daughter served first at last. You see the price of admission. My father folded his hands, looked at a spot slightly above my head, and said they wanted to fix this as a family. And my mother untied her apron, sat down across from me, and said, "We're prepared to be very generous, Suzanne. Here was the deal. And I'm going to lay it out fairly because the terrible thing about my family's final offer is that it was a good one. I would sign the letter, their letter, the misunderstanding letter, telling Miami Valley I had verbally authorized the signature 2 years ago. The fraud claim would fold. The investigation would close before it reached a police report. The family name would stay out of the file cabinets of strangers, and in exchange, 3 things. Brandon would sign a repayment schedule drawn up by Mom, paying me back every dollar of the damage at $400 a month. He slid it across the table, his actual signature already on it. First man in this story to sign something true. My rent, should I ever come home, was abolished forever. Mom said the word abolished like a queen repealing a tax, and then the centerpiece. Dad cleared his throat and said that they'd talked to the fellow at the title office, and they were ready to put my name on the deed to the house. This house, Susie, it goes to you. My mother leaned in on the word deed, eyes bright, and delivered the line she must have been saving all week. You want things in writing. Fine, we'll put the house in writing. And for a moment I will admit this to you, and to nobody at that table. The offer worked on me. The house I grew up in. The proof notarized and recorded that I mattered. The due inheritance as apology. The deed as the receipt for my whole childhood. My thumb found the brass key in my coat pocket. Sharp teeth. Cheap metal. One copy. Everything I actually owned. I looked around the table at their faces. Hope on Dad's, relief preloaded on Brandon's, triumph banked on Mom's. And I asked the only question that had ever mattered. The one no folder could answer. I said, before I sign anything, Mom, will you say you're sorry, not for getting caught? For the signature. The kitchen clock above the stove is loud when nobody speaks. I'd never had a chance to learn that before. My mother looked at me for a long, long moment, and I watched her consider it. That's the detail I can't put down. Even now, somewhere behind her eyes, the word sorry was actually available on a shelf she could reach. And I watched her decide it cost too much. She smoothed the tablecloth with her palm twice and said, I did what mothers do, Suzanne. I moved money inside my own family for my son. I'm sorry you can't see that. There it was. The whole creed in 2 sentences, and an apology addressed to my eyesight. Dad said her name once quietly, Pat. And it went nowhere, the way it had gone nowhere for 40 years. Brandon started to speak, and she stilled him with 2 fingers, not even a glance. And that told me the last thing I needed, to know about who had always been driving. So I stood up. I wasn't shaking. I want that on the record. My hands were as steady as they've ever been at a keyboard, because for the first time at that table, I wasn't performing calm. I just was. I took their letter out of the first folder and set it unsigned next to the lemon cake. And I said, You're right, Mom. Everything in this family is everyone's. That's why nothing in it was ever mine. Not my paycheck, not my credit, not my name on a loan I never saw. I'm taking one thing back, just one. My name. My mother's voice cracked exactly then, not before. And that crack was rage, saying I would not dare. Saying family. Saying after everything, I heard my mother lose her composure for the first time in my life. And I heard myself keep mine. And I finally understood which of the 2 of us had been running scared for years. At the door behind me, my father said, Susie, and then nothing. For once. He didn't tell me not to make it a thing. It already was one. Monday morning, I took 2 hours of personal time, and I did the errands that end a world. First stop. The UPS store on Linden with the notary desk, 900 when it's empty. The notary was a kid with a neck tattoo and a stamp, profoundly uninterested in my biography, and I have never been more grateful for a stranger's boredom. I laid the affidavit flat. Date of discovery, that a Thursday in April. My condo died on the phone. Description of instrument, one personal loan, 38,000, co-signature forged. And then the wide blank line, identity of the person believed responsible. And I wrote in my own steady hand, Patricia Ann Chandler. My mother's name in my handwriting on a sworn document. The mirror image of what she'd done to me, except mine was true. And that difference, that one difference, is the entire hinge of my life. I signed my own name under it. My real S. And here is what I understood while the stamp came down. The thing 9 years of rent had been hiding from me. I was never paying for a bedroom. I was paying dues on a membership, the daughter membership renewed monthly in a club that was never going to vote me in. The notary said, 8 please. Cheapest exit in America. Second stop. The police substation on East 3, where a patient officer with a clipboard took my report, assigned it a number, and said someone would be in touch. And did I want a victim advocate? I said, no. Thank you. I had Beth and a basil plant and a deadbolt. Then I drove the file to Dana Whitfield, who read the name on the line without one flicker of surprise. Which told me she'd known since April, and she said just one thing as she stapled it. For what it's worth, Miss Chandler, most people sign the other letter. On the drive back to work, my phone buzzed against the cup holder. My father, you've made your choice. That was the whole text. He was right. It's the first one I ever got to make. I'm not going to give you a courtroom scene, because there wasn't one and this channel doesn't lie to you. What happened instead was paperwork, which is fitting since a paperwork is where the whole thing started. The credit union's investigation substantiated the claim in about 6 weeks. A certified document examiner compared the loan signature against years of my real one and put it in writing. The Keysnorts Bureau disputes went through, and one Tuesday in August, I refreshed my credit report on my lunch break and the loan was simply gone. All 4 late payments scrubbed, my score climbing back up the way water finds its level. The debt didn't vanish. Of course. It reattached to the people it had always belonged to. Brandon as primary borrower, and then my parents who took over the balance rather than watch him drown. Which even I will admit was the first honest financing arrangement in that family in a decade. The county offered my mother a diversion program, the standard path for a 63-year-old first offender making full restitution. She took it. No trial, no handcuffs. A file that closes quietly in 2 years if she keeps the agreement. Someone snorts, any of you will feel that's too soft, and I understand. I didn't need her punished. I needed it named on paper by strangers in a building her voice couldn't reach. The grand opening storefront on Wayne Avenue gave up its lease before Labor Day. BC Peak Marketing runs out of Brandon's townhouse again. 1 man and a laptop, its natural size. My parents cashed out part of Dad's retirement to cover the restitution schedule. The family fund survives. You see, it always survives. It just runs on their money now instead of mine. And every Sunday at 4, my phone rings, and it's an 85-year-old woman on Far Hills asking if the basil's still alive. It's winter now, and I can tell you how it all settled. In January, 3 weeks before my 35th birthday, I closed on a condo by the river, 2 bedrooms so Grandma can stay over, and an east-facing balcony where a slightly ledgy basil plant is wintering indoors, in the same terracotta pot I bought during the 72-hour storm. I handed the brass key to 2B back to Mr. Hale myself. He shook my hand and said I was a good tenant, which from Mr. Hale is a eulogy. My new key sits on a ring with nothing else on it. And some mornings I still press my thumb against it in the elevator out of gratitude the way other people touch a cross. My mother sent a Christmas card store-bought signed Mom and Dad in her treble-cleft hand. No note. I didn't burn it and I didn't answer it. I put it in the shoe box with Margaret's photographs. The last page of that particular ledger. And if a card comes next year, I'll file that one too. Boundaries aren't a war. They're just a door that locks from my side. Brandon and I don't speak. The restitution checks arrive on the 1st of the month, drawn on my parents' account, signed by my father. And on Tuesday nights, I teach a free class at the Belmont Branch Library. Money basics for women, credit reports, beneficiary forms, whose name is on what? 11 women came last week. They're all somebody's reliable one. When I showed them how to pull a full credit report, 3 of them found things and 1 of them cried. And I recognized the exact pitch of that cry. And I stayed late with her because 6 months ago, a nurse with chopsticks and an old woman with a shoebox stayed late with me. The family I paid for is gone. The one I'm in now runs on a different currency entirely. If you keep one sentence from all this, keep the one my grandmother should have been told 60 years ago. Love is not a bill you pay to stay, and the first signature you owe anyone in this life is your own name in your own hand on your own future. That's my story. 9 years of rent, 1 forged signature, and 1 quiet Monday morning where I finally wrote my own name. If this reminded you to pull your credit report, all 3 bureaus, the full report, do it this week. And if you're the reliable one in your family, Share this with someone who understands.